Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Jam-packed. Before we're done, update on the Golden Shoe Brackets Challenge. Our standings at the top. Pretty big log jam, kind of in, like, say, the top 10 spaces. We're going to give you about 5 or so of those, but even beyond what we're going to give you today, lots of room for movement as we kind of roll into the Sweet 16. Speaking of that, big update on that as it relates to the SEC. What a showing for the league, even if Georgia not quite involved with it. Kirby Smart has said something that I don't know that every Georgia fan is going to agree with, but I kind of do. We'll have that debate on Smart's own evaluation of his coaching performance from 2024. That on today's show. Celebration anytime Georgia beats up on the lousy stinging Gators. We'll give you some of that here today, too. And off the top, I love a good mystery. We'll try to solve the mystery of exactly what it was that five-star quarterback Jared Curtis meant with an Instagram post yesterday and perhaps where all of this is going here today. We'll cover that off the top and kind of give you some deeper insight into the quarterback situation here around Georgia. So what do you say we get it rolling? It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
My favorite genre of fiction is probably mysteries. I like whodunits and things like that. Just detectives. I think that's all kind of fun. So anytime we get a chance to sort of put our detective hat on here around DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, I probably jump at the chance to do that. We like cryptic social media posts. We've said before, we have a fairly high tolerance for drama when it comes to the recruiting trail. Don't really like drama from players once they're in college, and in this case playing for Georgia. But prior to coming to Georgia, if you want some theatrics and if you want some kind of, sort of dramatic effects, honestly, we're sort of here for that. That's kind of fun, kind of entertaining. So perhaps an example of that on social media yesterday. Now, total confession before we get into this. There are certain moments, and listen, I think of myself as a young man, try to, stay active and, do things like that. I'm running around chasing my kids all the time. So I think of myself as a young man, but there are various moments in which I am reminded of I am not as young as I used to be. This morning, an example of that. I woke up this morning to discover there had been a little bit of kind of a drama last night that I was not a participant in at all because I was sound asleep while all this played out. There was a message from five-star quarterback Jared Curtis on Instagram that kind of got people stirred up a little bit. Let me show you this on the screen, as I guess it was originally shared onto the X platform, which is mostly where I see stuff from Adam Gorney. He's a reporter for Rivals. And what this was a countdown clock. And it said, news coming soon. And at the time, it was 5 hours, 7 minutes, and 23 seconds. Now, if you kind of did the math on all that, the countdown would have taken you to 12 a.m., midnight in the Central Time Zone where Curtis lives in Tennessee, and 1 a.m. for those of us here in Georgia. So apparently, as I woke up this morning to discover, there was a little bit of a brouhaha on social media late last night, among Georgia fans of, is Jared Curtis about to drop some sort of major announcement at 1 a.m. Eastern Time, midnight his time? And what I have since been told by people who probably know more about these processes than I do is that when you put some sort of countdown on Instagram, it counts down to midnight as opposed to what you may mean is just the day of. It has been told to me that's perhaps what Curtis was doing there. Maybe that's the case. But the point is that we on Instagram yesterday, and, kind of for a lot of Georgia fans sort of waking up to this on Monday morning, have a teased announcement from Jared Curtis about perhaps something coming here today. And by the way, also, we have a portion of our audience that watches this show live, but like 99% of the people will consume this show, even video, certainly podcast, after the fact. So perhaps this is one of those days, and every now and then we have one of those, where by the time you hear or watch this show, you know far more about this topic than I do as we're sitting here. But the point is that for those of us who kind of woke up to this news, sort of saw a little bit of a scuffle, not scuffle, that's a fight, scuttlebutt, that's the word I'm looking for, a little scuttlebutt about this on social media, we are expecting to hear something from Jared Curtis here today. Now, if I had to guess what this is, and my guesses are, of course, frequently wrong, but if I had to guess what this is, I am guessing this is probably a tease of a commitment announcement from Curtis. In other words, even though we're like almost exactly a year from Curtis's previous commitment announcement, I don't expect this tease to be the actual commitment announcement. Once again, if I'm wrong about this, we'll just add this to the list of things I've been wrong about. But my assumption is this is a tease of a commitment announcement to happen. And this is what probably I think matters maybe here more than anything else. As we have been suggesting that all of this with Curtis, the 5-star, is expected to happen sooner rather than later. His unofficial multi-day visit to Oregon, followed by an unofficial multi-day visit to Georgia. All of that, we thought, was a little bit of a precursor to kind of an accelerated type situation where waiting until June, waiting until July, the time in the calendar that's kind of become the biggest moments for these sort of commitment announcements, did not necessarily seem like the Curtis thing was going to drag out quite so long. And so one of the big storylines for Georgia and just college football more broadly here in 2026, we may get some resolution on that sooner rather than later. And this may be the first hint that the sooner part of this really is starting to take shape. We will see if that's the case. But all of this also provides us a little bit of a chance to sort of circle back on what exactly is the relationship between Georgia and the 5-star quarterback, Jared Curtis, and is Georgia really in position to win a recruiting battle like this against a program like Oregon while on the field nowhere near as accomplished as Georgia, in the boardroom and in the bank account and the stuff like that, certainly a very formidable competitor when it comes to all of this sort of stuff. So why don't we hear here for a moment Jared Curtis in his own words, going back a few months ago, talking to our Jeff Santel about the recruiting process, and in particular kind of getting more in detail on what it was that he likes about Georgia. This is what Jared Curtis said to Jeff Santel back then.
Yes, sir. Just the stability in the coaching staff, and knowing Coach Smart and Coach Bobo aren't going anywhere. And those are my two biggest connections at UGA, and just getting to build a connection with them is always special. I was talking to Coach Smart a little bit before practice, like 20 minutes in his office, and it all went good and stuff. And I told Coach Bobo and Coach Gummy like 5 minutes after I got out of his office that I was wanting to commit, and they was really happy for me. And I was like, so how should I tell Coach Smart? And they was like, you just go up to him, say, hey, you want to be a dog, and go Dogs. And then that's that. And I was like, so that's pretty much what I've done.
So that's obviously going back and discussing the original commitment that Curtis made to Georgia, and obviously referencing Montgomery Van Gorder, a guy that's no longer with the Georgia program, now moving on to the NFL. You know how, like, sometimes you'll hear it said that being a president ages someone, and that over the course of, like, 8 years in office, if you are able to serve that long, boy, major change, your facial expressions and your overall features, that you just show your age. Sometimes I feel like recruiting is the same type of deal here, where obviously, teenagers grow and mature at a pretty rapid rate, but it's amazing. You see that video image of Curtis there, seems so much younger, going back, a little bit less than a year ago, so much younger in the face, so much younger in his demeanor than perhaps some of the stuff we've seen from him more recently. It's just amazing how rapidly, he's taking on physical maturity, it would sort of seem like. That particular image makes Curtis seem far younger than I would say that he probably feels if you're able to conduct that same interview with him here right now. But nonetheless, that's Jared Curtis kind of giving you some insight into what he liked about Georgia then, and we would presume what he still likes about Georgia now. We have said that if Georgia were to win with Curtis, and we think that Georgia has a good chance to do that, I don't know that anybody necessarily thinks they know for sure what Curtis is going to do. Some people seem to like Georgia here. Some people seem to like Oregon here. I'm not sure that anybody knows for sure. But if Georgia were to win with Curtis, what we have kind of said is that it would be a pretty big statement for Georgia in two respects. Later on, I'm sure we're going to kind of get into the Georgia coaching situation. That's obviously remaining a hot topic here as you move towards 2025. But for people who have questions about how the Georgia coaching staff, especially on offense, is set up for the future, if you're winning with one of the biggest, if not the biggest quarterback on the board for 2026, I think you have to take that as a pretty strong endorsement of that coaching staff, Mike Bobo in particular, and a little bit of a stern rebuke into those who've been too critical of it, even if there is some reason for a desire to see offensive improvement for Georgia. For those who've really kind of come down harshly on Bobo or Kirby for his seeming loyalty to Bobo, if Georgia wins with Curtis, it seems to be a rebuke against that criticism and an endorsement of what the future of the Georgia offense can look like with Mike Bobo at the helm. Same thing for the NIL part of this, is that Georgia is the bigger, better program than Oregon, but Oregon's thought to be the more aggressive spending program perhaps right now. And if Georgia were to win with Curtis, I do think that would also kind of give you a little bit of enhanced belief of what Georgia is capable of from an NIL standpoint. I'll also say this, and this will be kind of my final thought on this subject, at least for right now, until we find out officially what it is that's on Jared Curtis's mind. I think it's interesting to compare Georgia's pursuit of Curtis this year with some of its recent quarterback recruiting escapades. Like, go back to a year ago when the big name on the board was Julian Juju Lewis. It seemed pretty obvious, even though there was a connection between Georgia and Lewis, that Georgia, if I'm just being candid, kind of wasn't that interested. With Lewis still out there and on the open market, Georgia was first going after Matt Zollers and then accepting the commitment of Ryan Montgomery and content to do all of that without much concern for what Lewis was actually going to do. Clearly, Georgia had some interest in Lewis. They had him on campus. He visited several times. But Georgia was sort of not what I would describe as kind of all in on Julian Juju Lewis. I think this year, in 2026, there is seemingly a much more aggressive attempt to go after Jared Curtis. You might be led to believe that Georgia just likes Curtis better than Lewis. And at one point in time, both quarterbacks were in the same 2026 class until Juju reclassified. That Georgia is making Curtis a priority for the class of 2026. But as you know, while Georgia is clearly operating like Curtis is its first choice for 2026, this is not the only quarterback that Georgia is taking visits from, including just the last couple of days even. Georgia has interest in other 2026 quarterbacks. They're shooting their shot with Jared first, but if Curtis chooses Oregon, it seems like Georgia's in a pretty good position to then pivot to go look at someone else. They have made Curtis a priority, but they have not made Curtis their only option. I think that's also true when it comes to quarterbacks on the Georgia roster as well. We believe right now, it seems certainly likely that Gunnar Stockton is set up to become the starting quarterback here in 2025. And with that likely to occur, and perhaps Curtis coming in, some might wonder, okay, where does that leave a guy like, say, Ryan Puglisi, for instance? I think it's important to note that despite the fact that it looks like right now Stockton's going to win this quarterback competition here at this moment, and Georgia might have a chance to win with a very impressive prospect in the upcoming recruiting class, I don't think either of those two statements, if they prove to be true, is any kind of indictment whatsoever on Ryan Puglisi. That when we think about other options at quarterback for Georgia beyond just Jared Curtis, I still think Ryan Puglisi needs to be a very big part of that conversation, because last year, and presumably this upcoming year, he's going to get a lot of what Jared Curtis won't have if he eventually commits to and then signs with Georgia. He's going to have the experience that Gunnar Stockton's using as a real weapon in a quarterback competition right now, the seasoning and development time around the program, some time on the field. That's what Ryan Puglisi is going to have in his back pocket if he's competing with Jared Curtis at some point in time in the future. So it's important to note that Georgia does appear to have a 2026 recruiting priority, and it appears to be Jared Curtis. But Curtis is not the only quarterback that's a part of Georgia's plans for the future. They may need to eventually pivot to a different quarterback in this class if Curtis chooses Oregon, which he very well might do. And even if that isn't the case, Georgia is certainly not going to take its eye off a guy that it brought in and is bringing along when it comes to Ryan Puglisi. So the point is that the mystery here is pretty fun. What's Curtis's announcement going to be? When is he going to commit? Would he perhaps commit to Georgia? All of the mystery and intrigue around this is really fun. But this is not just Jared Curtis or nothing for Georgia. There are potentially other quarterback options available to Georgia in this class, and there are other quarterbacks on the roster who still have the potential of having a very bright future too, including Ryan Puglisi. So we can watch this play out. It's always good to see Georgia add a good player, and I think most of us hope that Georgia can add Jared Curtis. But Jared Curtis alone is not going to be the sole story of what Georgia's future looks like at the quarterback position. There are other names to consider as well, and we're going to still consider all of those. All right, let me go shift gears to something completely different here for a moment. It was an awesome weekend to be a Georgia fan if you pay attention to baseball. Georgia went down to Gainesville, the lousy, stinking Gators, as we like to call them, and not only won the series, got a series sweep, and made a gigantic statement in the process. You know, a year ago, Charlie Connon's the best player in the sport, huge slugger, setting records left and right. And after losing him to the Major League Baseball draft, here in 2025, Georgia's still swinging the bats just as well as they ever have. This weekend, it looks like they may have figured some stuff out on the mound too. And all of a sudden, Georgia baseball is playing an awesome brand of baseball, going down there and beating up on a rival, but also making a case for the team right now to be essentially the best in college baseball. And listen, when I talk about stuff like this, I think people sometimes get nervous that we're going to spend like half our time talking about non-football sports. Y'all, we're never going to do that. We're always going to be a football show. We start with football. We talk about football for literally like 99% of the show. But I am going to be a little bit of an evangelist for the Georgia baseball team here just for a moment because I think this is really fun. And if you've been to Foley Field, the atmosphere is great. This team in particular is really fun to watch. I think SEC baseball as a product is sort of on fire right now. I think the whole thing is awesome. I'll show you a couple of Georgia fans having some fun with this, starting with our buddy Mad Dog. Now, later on for our Golden Shoe, we're going to update our bracket challenge. So I'm going to give you kind of an early Golden Shoe here from Mad Dog, who wrote in to say the Diamond Dogs picked up a pair of alligator boots during the business trip to Florida. What he gives you is a wonderful generated image of a Georgia baseball player wearing some alligator skin boots. It's amazing, first of all, over the course of the now, 5 years we've been doing the Golden Shoe, how the technology has kind of evolved of the submissions. That's awesome from Mad Dog. Love to see Georgia fans having a good time with this. And in particular, I love to see the Georgia baseball official account having fun with this too. The big website that mostly covers college baseball is called D1 Baseball. They had a whole slew of staff picks, making a series pick for Georgia and Florida, and 10 out of the 11 picked Florida to win the series. Only one reporter, his name is Jack DeLongchamps, I guess that's how you say it. He was the only one to pick Georgia to win the series. He was touting himself on social media. That earned a retweet from the Georgia official account. It was also noticing that too, so even the official account having some fun here on this as well. So anytime Georgia beats up on Florida in basketball, in football, now in baseball, Georgia is literally dominating Florida across the board right now, and the Diamond Dogs deserve to take a little bit of a bow for that. This was a lot of fun. Great to see Georgia not only get a series win, but get a sweep and really send a message perhaps to the rest of the sport that maybe right now the road to Omaha goes through Foley Field in Athens, Georgia. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We are so happy to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today. We're live on video, 10 a.m., and as I said before, most people watch the show on demand, but if you're able to join us live, we're thankful to have you for that. But whenever you watch it, whatever makes sense for you, we're just really, really glad to have you with us for it here today. Radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcast, wherever you find them, Apple, Spotify, everything else. Just so thankful. So glad that you're here today. Also thankful to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia who make it all possible. Energy efficient windows and doors. We'll tell you about that all the time. And we invite you to have Pella come out to your house or to go see them there in the Experience Center in Duluth and do all that kind of stuff. We tell you all about all of that. But as we've been telling you lately, there's also a great chance for you to go out and see them out and about in the public. One of the things our friends from Pella, they love to do, the Pella experts, they like to be in the community where you are. I had a chance not too long ago to hang out with them at the Atlanta Home Show. That was a lot of fun. And when you go out and meet Pella out in public, you find out these are good, friendly people that love their work, but they also love being a part of the community too. So you've got a great chance here coming up this weekend to see them again. Our folks from Pella are going to be out at the Brookhaven Cherry Blossom Festival. First of all, we love these sort of festivals, being outside here in the springtime of year. That's always great. The Brookhaven Cherry Blossom Festival is going to be taking place this weekend from March 29th to March 30th. The folks from Pella are going to be there. And if you go see them, they always have some cool stuff to maybe give away, but they're also just, in fact, at the Atlanta Home Show, we gave away some DawgNation stuff there, which were really fun. But the main thing is, if it's time for you to make an upgrade to get better windows so that your house can look better on the inside, so it can feel better, look better on the outside, that's a great chance to sort of put your hands on the product. See the really creative, innovative design concepts like the blinds that are built into the windows, the screens that allow you to kind of open the window and still have that built-in screen. So now maybe not the pollen time of year, but the other times of year when the weather's really pleasant, you get that nice fresh breeze coming in to get that fresh air. Sort of things that sort of makes your house feel the best when you have fresh air flowing, and the Pella windows give you a chance to do that. If you haven't really investigated window technology in a long time, I think you'll be blown away by some of the stuff that Pella can do for you. And they're also offering great savings right now as well. Now, about $750 off your project and 0% APR for 36 months. So here's how you get in touch. Really important. PellaGA.com/DawgNation. That's the website. PellaGA.com/DawgNation. You can also give them a call. 678-638-1429. 678-638-1429. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is going beyond this weekend at the Brookhaven Cherry Blossom Festival as well. All right, so we got John Stinchcomb coming up in a moment. Update on our Golden Shoe Bracket Challenge later on. But for now, let's go around the DawgHouse, poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. And I'm going to play a clip here coming up from Kirby Smart. I'm actually going to play it into two clips, break it in half. So Kirby was on with the personality Josh Pate. Many of you may know who this is. And while Georgia fans are largely, not even largely, unanimously in support of Kirby Smart, huge fans of his, and how could you not be? I do believe that what Smart says in the clip you're about to hear, and the pair of clips you're about to hear, is going to be semi-controversial to some Georgia fans, although I do agree with Kirby on this. Or at least, let me say it this way. I don't have any problem with Kirby saying what he's saying here. I think there's a lot of evidence to support the point that he's making. I think it kind of leads us to a conversation that we should probably have. So Kirby on with Josh Pate, the college football media personality. Kirby asked about his reflections on 2024, and Kirby gave a very clear, unmistakable statement about what the job he and his assistants did given the challenges of the 2024 season. Listen to Kirby on this with Josh Pate and tell me if you agree with this.
Coaching job we've done by far, 100%. We were not as good as some of the years previous, and we had twice the schedule some of the years previous. So to the naysayers, to the onlookers, to the people that don't know, I respect everybody's opinion. You can have an opinion, you can do what you want with it. I know football, and I know the level of schedule we had to play, and I know the roster we did it with, and I know the injuries we had. By far and away, the best job that our staff and our organization has done, easily.
So that's Kirby Smart, and I don't know that every Georgia fan is going to agree with what Smart says there. The idea that this was the best coaching job that he's done. In fact, I think that many of you probably look at that and say, well, now be careful. Don't shortchange what 2021 was or 2022 was, or go back to what I hope never gets lost to time, because all of a sudden now it starts to feel like a little bit longer ago. Don't go back and forget, the way in which this program kind of rose up in 2017 and made thinking about and believing in national championships truly seem possible because of that run to an SEC championship and that win in the Rose Bowl and that close call between, winning a national championship even then. Don't forget about 2017. I think there are some Georgia fans who may hear all that and say, boy, let's not forget the special seasons that we have had and kind of call this the best coaching job simply in kind of a recency bias, prisoner of the moment type situation. But the reason why I personally have no problem with Smart saying what he says there and describing the 2024 season that way is I do believe it's appropriate to continually reinforce just how tough the 2024 schedule really was. Now, I don't like using it as an excuse for why the offensive performance wasn't better. I don't like that. But I do believe, in light of the fact that during the year, and we certainly talked plenty about this, the College Football Playoff Selection Committee was incapable of judging who was and wasn't playing an equally tough schedule. They're just not capable of doing that. It's one of the reasons why we have zero respect for the body that is the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, because the most basic tenets of their job, they're just unable to do them. They're a worthless institution, almost in every way imaginable. So the idea that Kirby Smart, leaders are repeaters, the fact that Smart is continually reinforcing how tough of a schedule Georgia played, sometimes the message for that's not us because we already know that. Sometimes the message is really intended for people outside the bubble of Dawg Nation because there's a lot they don't know, and that's proven repeatedly. And so when he keeps hammering home the schedule we played, the schedule we played, the schedule we played, I don't know that's necessarily being used as a cudgel for Georgia fans who are a little bit critical. I think some of that is, hey, college football's not even right now. And as we said on Friday's show, SEC teams are sort of graded on a harsher curve than some of the teams from the other conferences because the people that run college football, the powers that be, are desperate for this to be a national sport. And so from that standpoint, I don't mind Kirby kind of restating what he said in the past, that when you look at how we performed, our schedule has to be a major component of that evaluation. I would also say, in addition to that, I think it's really, really dangerous as a fan to have a national championship or bust mentality. And that's not the same thing as saying that sometimes there aren't national championship or bust type seasons. You could make a case that this past year was sort of national championship or bust for a team like Ohio State. Ohio State's this big macro program. Even before last year, they essentially spend as much as anybody does. They expect to win championships, had not won one in about 10 years. Their hated rival Michigan had. Hated rival also had a winning streak against them. This was, in many ways, kind of a, hey, we're going all in, sort of national championship or bust type season. Sometimes national championship or bust seasons do take place. And what I mean by that is, if it's not a national championship, you're not happy. Sometimes there are national championship or bust seasons. But if they're all national championship or bust seasons, as a fan, you're just sort of setting yourself up to be unhappy. That's my opinion, that you want to try to sort of set a level of expectation that gives the team you cheer for some room to achieve it. It can't all be, misery or nothing. A championship season has to be more than just staving off misery for another year. There has to be room and possible levels of achievement. And while Georgia did not win the national championship last year, and while for the most part I think we would say that Georgia really kind of wasn't a national championship level team last year, Georgia did accomplish something. Winning the SEC and beating Texas twice is a real accomplishment. And for me and for many of you, a legitimate memory that we're thankful to have. And so when Smart touts himself and his assistants for the job they did in 2024, looking back on those moments, I think he's well within his rights to do that. In fact, he went into more detail with that with Josh Pate. Here's another clip from Kirby.
To go through the gauntlet we went through, number one, to get into the SEC championship was an accomplishment with that schedule, because they don't make the SEC schedule like they do the NCAA basketball pool, where they say the quality of wins you have. They don't do that. They just do it sheerly off who are the top two teams in the conference. Well, we were able to do that. Then we were able to win that game, okay, which was in and of itself an accomplishment. And then we went on and played a really good Notre Dame team and didn't play our best game in that opportunity and had some faulty special teams plays, and they beat us. But all in all, I was very pleased with what we got out of our team, and it was below the standard statistically in a lot of areas, but a lot of that had to do with the schedule we played.
So don't miss that at the end. Kirby Smart says, hey, offensively we were, maybe even some defensively too, we were below our standards statistically. That's owning that in a way that we've heard plenty of Georgia players, some of them former Georgia players, do. But at the same time to say, still won the SEC, still beat Texas twice. There were real tangible accomplishments. I think that Kirby Smart's right to point that out. And I would say, as a fan, and of course I speak from the perspective of a fan on this, when I look back on the 2024 season, I have a lot of happy memories. Wasn't perfect. At times you thought maybe it could have been better. The game against Notre Dame was a gigantic disappointment. But overall, you know what? when I think back on that season, I think back on some cool moments and some happy memories. And given the nature of the schedule that Georgia played, the fact that they were still able to call themselves SEC champions at a time in which the league has never been deeper, Kirby feeling pretty good about his accomplishment in that respect. I think he's well within his rights to do so. And that is Around the DawgHouse here today, poured by our friends at Dr. Pepper. And, of course, a lot of you watching a lot of sports right now, whether it be baseball on the weekends, the pros coming up here very soon, or everything else going on in the world of sports. As you're kicking back and relaxing, popping open a delicious, one-of-a-kind flavor of Dr. Pepper and enjoying that as you do all that just makes a lot of sense to me. So as you're out there shopping at your local Kroger, wherever you're picking up your groceries, pick up some ice-cold Dr. Pepper to go along with what you're enjoying, whether it's the kinds of Dr. Pepper you grew up with or some of the really cool new flavors they're introducing right now. The Dr. Pepper Blackberry, the Dr. Pepper Blackberry Zero Sugar. We think you'll love that too. And we think that anything you're doing is made better by bringing a little Dr. Pepper along with you. I know for me, I look forward to enjoying some after each and every show, and I know it's a great treat for you whenever you get a chance to enjoy some as well. So thanks to Dr. Pepper for being a part of Around the DawgHouse. And make sure you pick some up today, including the brand new Dr. Pepper Blackberry and Dr. Pepper Blackberry Zero Sugar. All right, so a lot going on. Update on our Golden Shoe Bracket Challenge before we are done. Perhaps also some thoughts on why the Georgia schedule, and we've said this before, as tough as it was a year ago, may not get all that much easier here in 2025. New information on that here coming up today, too. But for now, on everything going on with the Dogs, let's talk to John Stinchcomb, the great former Georgia All-American. Here today, DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Say hello to John Stinchcomb. Great to have him on the show always. John, we just heard Kirby Smart with Josh Pate say 2024 is our best coaching job. And I think for some fans, this kind of comes across as a little bit of a retort in the ongoing debate of, like, say, Mike Bobo, Stacey Searles, what these guys did this past year. Some fans sort of take this as a response to that ongoing criticism and the online debate that takes place. But if you sort of ignore that part of it for a moment, when you do think schedule that Georgia played, the fact there was still an SEC championship, the fact that there were 2 wins against Texas, my belief is it wasn't a national championship season, but it also wasn't a season without accomplishment. And as someone who lives and dies with Georgia football, my memories of 2024 are certainly more good than not. Feeling like the season was a success and feeling like that it took a lot of really good coaching to get to the point that Georgia got to. I really don't have much of a problem with Kirby Smart describing that the way that he did. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, what I hear is 2 things. One, the schedule was one of the hardest, if not the hardest, that we've seen in recent history for a competitive team, for a team that's vying for national championships on an annual basis. So that stands out first. The second piece is no one knows the separation of talent year to year like Coach Smart does. And I think what he recognizes is the elite talent that we had in those national championship runs and the talent that we had this year as compared to who we were facing, that margin has never been smaller. And I think that's why he's saying for us to win an SEC championship, for us to make the college football playoffs, understanding that we just played the hardest schedule in his tenure here in Athens, and we don't have that separation of talent like we had in those national championship runs. I think that margin was made up for by what he considers coaching. And that doesn't mean the coaching was perfect. I'm not saying, I don't think that's what he's saying. I think what he's saying is the talent drop from what we saw in the national championship years to this year in Athens is notable. And it doesn't come right out and say it, but saying that, one, that schedule is difficult, and 2, knowing that we don't have the elite talent. We didn't have that separation position group to position group like we had before, and still being relevant, still being a part of that national championship discussion, still winning an SEC title. It means that there was accomplishment in 2024, and there is notable good things to laud from this past season. It's not, it wasn't a coward's mentality. It wasn't a loser's mentality of, but I think he's recognizing that there were successes that we can celebrate in this past season, and they were able to overcome a number of challenges that didn't exist in the previous years.
Let me give you a couple quick thoughts on this. We talked about baseball a little earlier. I'll give you a baseball analogy. Sometimes as a starting pitcher, you just don't have your best stuff. Cutter's not cutting, breaking ball's not breaking. But guess what? Sometimes you still got to stand out there and find a way to eat up some innings. You got to get some guys out, even without your best stuff, and you just got to give your team a chance to win. And one of the reasons why I think that Kirby's okay to say, our coaching performance in 2024 as someone on the inside thought it was outstanding is because I think the football version of this is we sort of didn't think Georgia had its best stuff. They were kind of coaching around some things, maybe at times on both sides of the ball, and for the most part, they did that. Not to the tune of a national championship, but to the tune of something that still, as Kirby said in the past, kind of put a number on the wall, that without their best stuff, they sort of found a way to stay in contention. They found a way to bring home a trophy. They found a way to do something. And sometimes as a coach, maybe the SEC championship or a trip to the college football playoff, maybe that was this team's ceiling this past year, but at least they got to that.
I think that's exactly what he's saying is, you don't want to come out at the beginning of the season and say, hey, let's have realistic expectations. We don't have that same roster that we've had in years past. We don't have that 2 and 3 deep where you're going, okay, as injuries come, we'll be able to absorb those, and there's not going to be a drop-off, a significant drop-off, because we're still superior to every opponent. You look at 1, the opponents we played, and 2, the development of talent, for the fans that are going, but we've had top 3 recruiting classes each year. Look at the attrition that Georgia's roster has had. Look at the additions that your competitors have had. Every week, they go in with a scouting report. Here is individual battles that we feel like we have an advantage. And I don't think they looked at it on a week-in, week-out basis going, we've got more advantages just in personnel like we have in the past. And so you have to be very realistic of what you've got and how to utilize that best for them to still win an SEC championships, for them to still play in the college football playoffs, knowing they didn't have that separation. I think that's what Coach Smart's saying is realistically, we met and exceeded many of the realistic expectations that you should have with the roster that we had and a schedule that we had to play.
Now, let me also say this, and this is sort of the honesty compels me to admit category, that when you say, okay, we were below our statistical kind of threshold, we didn't meet our standards statistically, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and when you attribute that back to the schedule that you played, I sort of think you get to do that once. That's the sort of like if you play Monopoly, that's the sort of get out of jail free card you can use one time, that if you kind of re-rack the same type of deal here in 2025, I don't think you have the same freedom to come back and say it was also a tough schedule again. I think that Georgia has earned as a program and Kirby as a coach certainly has earned enough credibility to say, boy, we played an unprecedentedly tough schedule. We were probably below our standard, but we still trying to find a way to get as much success as we could. I think as an answer for like one season and one individual year, that probably works pretty well. I don't know that people will be quite as receptive to that same evaluation if they were to try to offer that again after 2025. Now, I also believe there's a very good chance they won't need to. I think there's a really good chance, regardless of this year's schedule, that there's going to be improved play and improved statistical performance to match it. But if there weren't, I don't think you can necessarily re-rack that same claim 2 years in a row, even if the results feel somewhat similar. I just think that's the type of thing that sounds okay in 1 year, does not sound great as an explanation over the course of multiple years.
Yeah, well, what you hit on before I got on air is all things are not equal. There is no standardization of schedule. So Georgia this past year played a difficult slate of games. They will this coming year. They will all in the future. That's just what they have because of where we are. We sit in the SEC. There are other schools that are not going to have that challenge. And so I think you can look at it and reasonably say that's a difficult schedule. It's also not going to change all that much. Each year you're going to have to play some of the very best teams just because of where you sit in the conference and where the standard has been raised. What needs to rise, in my opinion, is the development of talent and that separation that Georgia can create just in personnel and just overall operations as an organization, as a football program. I think what we've seen, and I think what Coach Smart has established, is this new level of expectation of performance. And no matter whether it's from the NFL or transfer portal, there is still a high level of expectation that Georgia is going to field a national championship caliber team on an annual basis. That's not easily done. It's hard when you play the schedule that we play. It's harder when you look at some of the schedules that as you're competing for spots in this college football playoff and seeding and off games and home field advantage and all these type advantages and opportunities that are competitive. And you realize that other competitors don't have to go through that gauntlet that Georgia does. I think it takes A, some recognition, but B, you can't hide behind that. And that's the point that I feel like you're making, BA, is it's going to be a rough schedule. And you can note it, but it's not changing. So you can't complain about it. Not that Coach Smart is. You can't cry about it. Not that Coach Smart is. Until that system changes, you have to be able to answer that bell and answer that call. And Georgia's not a program that makes excuses. So what are you going to do about it? And I think the answer to that is continue to pour into the players that we get and make them the very best that they can be and create that separation no matter what your schedule is.
I think that's really true. I want to talk about Jared Curtis here for a moment, the five-star quarterback. And I think it's interesting, and this is sort of based on maybe people who know more about this situation than perhaps I do, that, Georgia, the best I can tell, while it's certainly in the mix for Curtis, and I think a lot of people believe that Georgia has a chance to win with Curtis, I don't get the impression that Georgia's sitting around, in a sort of prayerful position saying, please choose us, please choose us, please choose us. And Georgia's just sort of like paralyzed waiting for Curtis to sort of make up his mind about what he wants to do. I get the impression that, as Curtis goes through his process, we may get a big update on that here today. As he goes through his process, he is doing it in a very business-like manner. And conversely, I sort of get the impression that Georgia's doing the same thing here of, Curtis is deciding, do I want to go to Georgia? Do I want to go to Oregon? But Georgia, seemingly a little bit like what we're seeing NFL teams do with like Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart, some of these quarterbacks near the top of the NFL draft, they're deciding, hey, do we want to make the commitment necessary to kind of get in business here with Jared Curtis? And it certainly seems that Georgia likes Curtis and they're willing to make him a priority, but they are not willing to make him the only quarterback they're considering. And the sense that I get, once again, from people who are closer to this situation, they're also not willing to make him a, sort of an exclusive, commodity, even when it comes to the quarterbacks in the roster, like, say, a guy like Ryan Puglisi going forward. These are fascinating times where, the player in question clearly has a lot of power. He's going to make a choice and be very rich based on the choice that he makes. But because of the obvious financial commitment that the team would have to make, both either Georgia or Oregon, that they're a lot more open-eyed about this maybe process too. It feels like this recruitment in particular is unlike maybe any that you and I have ever talked before, or maybe any we've talked about here on DawgNation, where the obvious business-like nature of this, I just think, is unavoidable and frankly unmistakable.
Yeah, now we're talking about distribution of assets. And I think there are lessons learned and characteristics of organizations that are identifiable for each program. I think there is something to glean from the Carson Beck scenario of there was a considerable amount of assets that were pooled to him in that 24 season in Athens, and it came at a cost for other position groups and other places, and where you can do with your funds if there is a finite amount of money, though it doesn't seem like it at times, as to how much you can distribute among your team. And I'm sure there was consideration of, if Carson's coming back, how much resources can we attribute to it? Obviously, not to the level that Miami was able to recruit him and bring Carson to be a part of their team. But like every NFL organization, they're going, yes, we can pay for the very best of the position group, but our job is to field the best team possible. Do we want those best players? Yes. But there is a window, a room, or a range of resources that we're willing to contribute to any individual player, any individual group. And when you take from or add additional space to one player or one position group, it comes at a cost. That means there's less resources that you can spend in other places. So I think you're looking at it as, okay, what's it going to cost us to bring a player, any player, into the mix to be a part of this? And what does it bring? What kind of edge does it provide? So it's a weird metric that, obviously we're not privy to every decision and the range that they have attributed to each group, position group, and individual players in that group. So I think Georgia is trying to be judicious and figure out how can they manage, A, their resources well, and B, still get the very best players available across the board that puts them in a position to have the best team, because there's great individual players, but you look at their teams, and ultimately that's how Georgia's going to be measured, by their team success.
On this topic, Doug Magnus is a guy watching us on YouTube, and he was talking about, the Curtis thing. He says, how many different quarterbacks can you pay? And the honest truth is, I don't think that's a rhetorical question. I think that's the question that a lot of programs are asking right now, because in the case of Texas, they were presumably paying more than one very well a year ago. They had, Quinn Ewers as a starter, Arch Manning as a backup. Manning knows his worth. He's not sitting the bench there for free. You would presume they were spending a lot of money on multiple quarterbacks. But, for other programs, like think about, like, say, Alabama right now, Ohio State right now, some of these programs that have open quarterback competitions, it's hard to put your eggs into just one quarterback, whether that's a guy like Ryan Puglisi who has experience, or a guy like Jared Curtis that would be coming in with a lot of accolades. It's hard to put your eggs into one basket. That you do kind of want to diversify at the quarterback position a little bit if you can. But as you said, now that becomes about an allocation issue of, well, that's a lot of money now invested to one position group at the expense of the rest. It's one of the reasons why we do see more general managers around college football now, because these are not questions of, do you like the player? It's more the NFL thing of, do you like the player at a certain cost here, at a certain price? And that now definitely matters. So when somebody says, hey, how many quarterbacks are you going to pay? How much quarterback depth are you going to try to instill into your program? Those are not rhetorical questions, I don't believe.
Yeah, and now we're entering into waters that I think is yet to be explored as we talk about, revenue sharing and collectives really sponsoring the majority of your team. There are opportunities for individuals to continue to go out and get individual third-party NIL deals that can help a program pay their player without having to pull from those pools that get shared across the rest of your team. So for other programs that have third-party donors that can go above and beyond and pay those individual NIL agreements to specific players, I think there is an advantage, a competitive advantage. And we'll continue to see, and it's yet to be defined, who they are. I think there's probably some names, some schools that we have a good idea of who that might be. But for individual players, Arch Manning is a guy that you can get deals for just because of that Manning name. And there are individual companies and some national brands that want to contribute to helping your program move along and get some of those players. But it's one of those, it's part of the college landscape that, I don't think is real pretty right now, and nor is it defined. And there's still a number of new places that we're going to go that have yet to be defined.
All right, last thing. We don't have to spend a long time on this because it's not very fun, and I talked a good bit about it on Friday, so we don't need to re-rack the whole deal. But I did want to ask about the Marcus Easley situation we found out about. Obviously, Nitro Tuggle's got his own thing going on, but as I said on Friday, right or wrong, fair or not, I don't care that much about speeding necessarily. We haven't made a big deal about speeding tickets. And if so-and-so gets in trouble for going the wrong way on a downtown street, that feels like a mistake to me. That doesn't feel like a scandal. I did not like the details of the Easley situation, and now we've learned more about that, and I just think it seems really dangerous. And from a pro-Georgia perspective, without gaming this out too far, it's the kind of thing that could put a lot of things we love about Georgia football in real jeopardy if something like that is not taken as absolutely serious as it could be. And nobody inside the Georgia facility needs me to tell them that. They already know that. But I also think it's just appropriate to be honest and call balls and strikes here. That, not everything in like the 24, whatever it has been, traffic issues with Georgia the last year plus, am I, on edge about. We haven't made a big deal about that. We don't get up on a soapbox and preach at people about that kind of stuff because I have my own driving issues, just being completely honest. I thought the Easley thing was pretty serious, and we've learned more details about that kind of confirm what my suspicion was on Friday, that that's a pretty serious deal here, and that is not the kind of thing that Georgia needs to be connected with at all. I don't know what you do about it, but John, pretty serious stuff coming out of the Easley arrest and the allegations of, the very reckless driving that led to a vehicle hitting two cars and then an apartment. I mean, lives are at risk because of that, and I just think I think you got to take that as seriously as you possibly can.
And I think Georgia has a track record now of looking objectively at each individual case and trying to deal appropriately. First words out of Tuggle and Easley's situation was indefinite suspension. So I think what Georgia's trying to do is not lump them all in just because there seems to be a storyline, obviously, because of an incident a few years back that drew national attention, and rightfully so. But each case is not the same. And I think you do need to look specifically at the detail of each and recognize that some are significantly more serious and should be handled differently. And I have every confidence that that's the way Georgia will approach it, is what's best and moving forward and how to handle each individual case rather than some blanket policy that will treat all things equal. They are not equal.
Yeah, no, I think,
and I think that's the right approach.
Yeah, I sorry to cut you off. I didn't mean to, but I think that's the part that's exactly right. You got to weigh the various details. Like, I mean, you're involved in sports and schools and things like that. Like, I'm not a huge fan of like zero tolerance policies, because I think a lot of times like a zero tolerance policy ends up punishing somebody for what somebody else did. It's also the kind of thing that's just sort of ripe for creating like a heavy punishment for what might be a small infraction. Like, as a leader and as someone who's managed young people before, I don't like zero tolerance policies. But as you're saying, over the course of a long list of infractions, recognizing what's truly dangerous, what's truly problematic, and sort of isolating that from what might just be another in a list, I think that's appropriate. And to me, at least on the basis of the allegations, that's what the Easley thing sort of felt like. And I agree with you. I have no doubt that Georgia knows this and is very serious about this. But I just think as someone who's in a position to have to talk about some of this kind of stuff, sometimes it's appropriate to say, hey, this is a little bit different than some of the other stuff. And I thought the allegations against him in particular, and I've got nothing against the young man, I don't even know him, but in this case in particular, I just thought that allegation far different, far more serious than some of the other stuff we've been hearing about over the course of the last year plus.
Yeah, and so on Friday, Charlie Warner was the keynote speaker at the NG3 banquet. I helped interview him, and he said, his first month, I guess, on campus in Athens, he gets a seatbelt violation and gets a ticket there. That's a far cry. It's a driving-related violation. That's a far cry from the Easley case, right? So you don't lump them all in the same boat and say, oh, it's yet another driving incident for the University of Georgia. No, They're not all created equal. And I think you look at the details. And Georgia has shown in the past that they are willing to part ways with individuals if they think it's best for the organization, the school, the athletic department, and the individual. So there is some ownership that needs to be taken. And I think Georgia has proven that that's their approach. I am aware of the countless numbers of outside advocates and speakers that they've come address the team and try to talk about the importance of having making good driving decisions and the like. So it's not something that they take lightly. It's not something that they've brushed under the rug. And a lot of it has made its way into articles and those blips on the TV, but most of it hasn't. And unless it comes out as a player's been dismissed, I don't think the first conclusion that fans can come to is, oh, Georgia's doing nothing about this, because that's just not the case. And I do think they're taking an individual approach as to let's address this situation rather than that blanket statement of this is the approach we're going to take across the board with a blind eye to the details of each case.
John, I think that's well said. And fun stories and not so fun stories. I'm always thankful for your perspective. We appreciate you being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia today. I kept you long, and I apologize, but very, very valuable stuff. Thanks for your time, and we'll look forward to the chance to talk to you soon.
Appreciate it. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, I think what John is saying there, I think what John is saying there is true based on my understanding from, once again, people who know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. We can bring the music down just a little bit more if you don't mind. That Georgia is certainly doing everything it can to sort of get the message across here. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I just think from our perspective, as someone kind of in the media on this, we've sort of said before, like, the public relations part of this is not interesting to me. I don't care about what's a bad look, so to speak. I care about what's actually bad. I'm telling you right now, at least on the allegations and the evidence and the stuff that sort of made its way in the media, the situation that we have talked about here, I mean, a lot of people involved in that are potentially lucky that it didn't turn out to be far worse than it did. It just seemed like really, really dangerous stuff, and the kind of thing that's a lot more serious to me than some of the other stuff that we've talked about. Georgia player later on this week got a ticket going 89-70. I hope they don't. But that's, once again, the kind of thing of, he without sin cast the first stone. I mean, I've probably, put the pedal down a little faster than I probably should. But the other situation, the one we've been talking about, to me is a very, very different thing than that. Anyway, we'll leave it there. I think we've probably said all that needs to be said on that front. Better to talk about happier stuff. And for me, that begins with a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. And, there is chat around the Adams household that the family may be getting together for another Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. I'm very lucky the fact that I get the DawgNation cruise coming in with all of you in a few weeks. But my kids are in school. My wife's got stuff going on. They're not able to join me on that Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. So they're coming to me like, Daddy, we want our own Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. You're going to be doing that with all your DawgNation people. We need to have ours as well. And so they've made it very clear that's their expectation. And so for me, that means I got to get on the phone with Jessica Slater and talk about, hey, my family wants to go on a cruise. We're going to try to make this happen. What are my options? What are my choices? And Jessica can just sort of walk you through the entire thing. And I'm telling you, that's the part that's really fun. When you start the process and when you're looking at your various ports that you might visit or the destinations you might go to or the things on the ship that are important for you to be able to enjoy, that's the part that just, the cruise itself may be 7 nights, it may be 4 nights, it may be 3 nights, but the actual experience of the cruise is many more months than that, because it's the time you plan getting ready for, it's the memories that you enjoy for years after the fact. It's one of the reasons why I believe you deserve a vacation, and the vacation you ought to take with you and the people you love is a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. So give Jessica Slater a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. All right, so after a historic run into the NCAA tournament with 14 teams, The SEC now puts a historic 7 teams into the Sweet 16. Let me say this here just for a moment. I find it to be interesting that a lot of times SEC people, and listen, I'm right there with you on that. A lot of times SEC people are kind of criticized for being too pro-conference, that people outside the SEC think it's weird that the SEC folks would have any kind of idea of quote-unquote conference pride. And as I said before, I have a sort of an SEC-centric worldview. Now, listen, I'm never going to root for the SEC rival, certainly not a Florida or anything like that. I'm not going to root for them to win. But I still kind of understand that my fortunes benefit when the SEC rises in football, basketball, or anything else, that there is sort of a pro-SEC world out there. Also, because the fact that the SEC is contiguous states and they all exist, at least historically, in the same kind of region, I think it creates commonalities among SEC teams that does not exist when you're talking about like the Eastern Seaboard, which kind of makes up the ACC, or the old Pac-12 stretches from like Seattle to Phoenix. Very little commonalities and defining characteristics of people just because of like a vertical, conference. But when it's more kind of clustered, bordering states, not in a vertical sense, but in kind of a sort of a quadrant of the country, I think there's more shared commonalities. The SEC's kind of always had that. It makes the SEC different than other leagues. So there is a sense of SEC pride. Other people will tell you that's weird. But did you notice, perhaps you did, when it seemed like the SEC was sort of heading for some disappointment? Texas lost in the first 4. Teams like Georgia and Texas A&M and others lost in the first round. That there were a lot of people who would think it's weird that the SEC shows conference pride. They were certainly there to nag the SEC when it seemed like the SEC wasn't heading for a great run to the NCAA tournament. Did you notice that? I think you probably should, because it's the sort of passive-aggressive way that sometimes the SEC gets covered. These are things that I think matter. And now that the SEC has 7 teams into the Sweet 16, perhaps you'll hear a little bit less about some of that kind of stuff. I'll also say a couple of things here for a moment. So when you look ahead to what's going to happen on Thursday, Sweet 16 games taking place, BYU hosts Alabama. I think that, listen, the one big pick that I got wrong was we did have Alabama and kind of a surprise kind of going out in round 2. Obviously, that didn't occur. That was also a huge reach. But we've been a little skeptical of Alabama. I think that BYU will be very dangerous coming up on Thursday. Florida hosts Maryland. Maryland, the only buzzer beater in the tournament thus far. And the guy for the Terps, as they're calling it, what do they call it? The Crab Five, as opposed to the young Fab Five from Michigan, going back to my youth. Now it's the Crab Five because of the closeness of the of Maryland to the water there. The buzzer beater, the guy clearly walked. And I don't know what we're supposed to do about this. I mean, I do realize that traveling just doesn't get called anymore. But I'm also not going to act like it's not somewhat of a blight on the game that I'm talking about obvious call was missed just to preserve the buzzer beater. I think that's pretty wild. So only buzzer beater thus far. And, it's a little bit of a suspicious one after the walk was not called there. Arizona and Duke, pretty good game on Thursday. Arkansas, Texas Tech, I think it'd be a good game. I did have Arkansas going over St. John's. One of you wrote to me to congratulate him on that pick. Listen, stuff like that means the world to me. There is a certain sanctity to the bracket. You want to try to get your picks right. The fact that somebody had made mention of my call of Arkansas over St. John's, I certainly appreciated that. Going to Friday, games taking place, at least 2 of these, in Atlanta. Ole Miss, Michigan State, good run through the tournament for Ole Miss here thus far. Michigan State, boy, they got some friendly officiating last night. Very friendly whistle in that win against New Mexico. Kentucky, Tennessee should be a ton of fun in Indianapolis. That's for a spot in the Elite Eight. Michigan, Auburn should be a pretty good game. Auburn, as of yet, not quite looking the part of the number 1 overall seed, but also for the most part kind of handling business. And then Purdue, Houston coming up on Friday as well. So we'll take a little bit of a break in the tournament here the next couple of days, but I really think even though chalk kind of prevailed, there weren't a lot of great upsets. There was only one buzzer beater. I tried to watch as much as I could this weekend. I think this is still an awesome sporting event. I really do. We're a football show. That's what we'll always be. But, man, this is a tournament that just delivers year in and year out. Okay, let me do one football thing before we wrap up our cruise around the SEC. We're obviously getting a little late here, too. So, speaking of CBS Sports, which had a lot of the basketball this weekend, at their website, cbssports.com, one of their writers of the day was looking at the chances of there being, quote-unquote, like surprise runs, Cinderella-type runs into the college football playoff. And what's interesting is, a couple of the names from the SEC kind of pop up in a discussion like this. You're going to see some chatter about Auburn on that right now. You're going to see a little bit of love for Florida on that, too, although maybe a little bit of a wait and see until we see how healthy DJ Lagway is coming into the fall. But in the case of Auburn here, I mean, we've said before that we expect major improvement from them here in 2025, where all of a sudden you're thinking about, 8 or 9 wins. And once you kind of get to that number, all you need is one ball to kind of bounce the right way for you. And now you really are in the playoff in a discussion, kind of like a South Carolina would have been a year ago, or an Ole Miss would have been a year ago. We think Auburn could be kind of one of those teams sort of teetering on that line this upcoming season, too. They've got quarterback depth. They've got a coach that's had success before. They probably haven't quite cashed in on the transfer portal the way they would like, but this is an upgraded roster and perhaps a much better team. Now, where this kind of becomes relevant for Georgia is, we said this on Friday, that the one guy was like trying to spin Georgia as playing a more manageable schedule here in 2025. We heard Kirby a moment ago saying a lot of the issues that Georgia had in 2024 solely attributable or primarily attributable to an unprecedentedly difficult schedule. But the truth is, when you think about who Georgia re-racks here for this upcoming season, still got to play Texas, still got to play Alabama, although the venue shifts, still got to play Ole Miss. Once again, that's a home game too. There's also the potential, the teams that you've been kind of counting as some of your easier wins of late, the Auburns, the Floridas, those teams, based on some early projections, could be far better too. So keep that in mind, that for Georgia fans who looked at 2024 and thought, boy, the schedule's never been tougher, in 2025, on paper, maybe it seems a little easier. It doesn't currently rank as the toughest schedule in America by the analytics folks, but it's still in like the top 15. But that's also before teams like Florida and Auburn perhaps prove to be much better this upcoming year than they've been in the past. Something to consider. We'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Oh, yeah, by the way, before we wrap up here, too, let me also give a shout-out to our friends at the Finnish Long Drink. Love the Finnish Long Drink. Great time to enjoying that. Hanging out on a little bit of a golf course this weekend. A lot of folks taking care of that Finnish Long Drink. You always see it when you're in the golf course, and I love that. I love the way it just goes with that. And whatever you're doing outside this time of year, we think it's awesome. The traditional citrus, that's the blue can, the grapefruit flavor, the gin kick, the long drink strong, 8.5% alcohol by volume. All of that is awesome. So make sure you check it out. You can find it online, thelongdrink.com. And while you're there, you can put in your zip code, figure out where to pick some up. You can also find out the story about how this sort of starts back in Finland in the 1950s when the Summer Games were in Helsinki. Makes its way to America, in the last few years, then to Georgia, and now a big part of DawgNation for a good number of years. All of that for you online. It's thelongdrink.com. Make sure you check it out today. Thelongdrink.com. Speaking of the NCAA tournament, the Golden Shoe Bracket Challenge is ongoing. We're going to give you our update on the scores here. Now, I'm going to show you our top 5 here at the moment. These are not the only people that have a chance to win. We're going to see dramatic changes in all of this in the days to come. But for now, there was kind of a nice clean break after our top 4. So Alex Nader is number 1 in this. He's got 175 total points here at the moment. So he's looking pretty good right now, the 175 total points. His Auburn is his eventual national champion, still very much alive. Mac Howard at number 2 at the moment. He's got eventual national champion Tennessee. Craig Gear comes in. He's got Florida. Robbie Rainey also in 4th right now, and he's got Auburn as well. So you've got a nice battle going on here. 2 people tied at 3rd. Mac Howard all alone in 2nd. Alex Nader leading the way at number 1. So a fun bracket challenge going on here with our Golden Shoe. But obviously a lot more folks still have a chance here on that. So best of luck to everybody who's involved. And we thank you for the tremendous participation. Lousy Stinking Gators lost to Georgia in basketball, swept in baseball, and It's been 1,598 days since those lousy, stinking Gators have beaten Georgia in football. Safe to say that Florida is down bad. Never been worse, and we love every minute of it. Our buddy $1 Million Eddie can't get enough. We're glad you're with us for it. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews is the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on all of that today. All right, we're going to get some of your comments and see what's going on here. If you're in our Golden Shoe Bracket Challenge, best of luck to you. We're just happy that you're here. Johnny Surf Dog says, I'm very proud of the Dogs winning the SEC title. Even the 2021 team didn't do that. It's still very difficult and something to celebrate loudly. Go Dogs. I agree with Johnny on that. I think it's absolutely right. Frederick Meredith, on the subject of Justin Williams. Yeah, you talk to people around the program, they'll tell you right now that he and Chris Cole both have a chance to be just unbelievable football players and already kind of on their way to being that. But anything you think is possible for them is absolutely possible. You're right about that. Free also touting Elijah Griffin. We've heard nothing but good things about him so far. D. Nally on the subject of the trophy case from Kirby and the game used visors. We may show this on the screen at some point in time this week because I saw that too. I've never really been a visor person. I don't really get I wear a hat for two reasons. When I wear one, it's either one of two reasons. It's either to cover up my head when I haven't taken a shower and my hair's all bedhead and messy. You just sort of throw the hat on. That covers that up. I don't really feel like the visor does that. B, because I'm basically bald up here on the top. You can't see it on camera, but we don't do a lot of turn and talks around here because that's not my best side necessarily. But once again, if you're trying to cover up the head so you don't get sunburn, the visor doesn't really help you with that. So I've never 100% understood the value of a visor. But Kirby loves his, and he does, I guess, have a trophy case of all the visors from all the big games. It showed up in a recruiting photo this weekend. I thought that was really funny. We'll probably have to show that at some point in time. Foster Moss says his bracket needs to be in the trash. Yeah, that happens sometimes. I am barely in the top 100 of ours, I think. I think I'm barely in the top 100. Yeah. So not doing particularly well myself, I don't reckon. Richie Bale's pointing out that Florida in baseball now 0-6 in conference play. Boy, you love to see that. Love to see that. D-Mart42, who mentioned Justin Williams earlier, he's also shouting out Chris Cole. Yeah, the body type for Cole is just, he already looks like a guy that could be drafted right now. Just an amazing, guy. G. Grace, no fan of Danny Hurley. Yeah, so I don't really like Hurley either. But I do like this presence in the sport. We lost a lot of coaches out of basketball at kind of one fell swoop. And to me, basketball has always been a coach's sport. It's a sport where the coaches are pretty famous. And so I like having a guy like Hurley who has that personality, easy to root against. I do like that. I like that. Although I am right there with you. Hurley himself, not all that likable. DMart42 says Jackson Arnold at $4 million is crazy. Is that what people are saying Arnold got to come to Auburn? I don't know that I buy that. I don't know that I buy that. Kaylee Mansell says it'd take more than $4 million for her to go to Auburn, which is a fair point too. I don't know that I'm buying $4 million for a guy like Arnold. Although I have said I do believe there's a chance he's much better this year. I think one of the things we sometimes do is I think that people take what might be largely an incentive-laden contract, and then they report that as if it's the number. And I haven't even seen the rumor on Arnold. But, oftentimes what we report is, so-and-so is getting $3 million. The actual truth is it could be up to $3 million, or it could be up to $4 million. That everybody benefits from large numbers being thrown around. We've said this from the very beginning, and this is one of those things that, the modest side of me takes pains to admit, but this is one of those things we got precisely 100% accurately right. That these wild numbers get thrown around because everybody benefits from the wild number. Media entity gets to put the graphic out. They get, easy clicks off of that. The school gets the benefit of being sort of thought of as this big program that can generate big dollars. The school that loses out on the player benefits because they say, hey, what do you want to do us to do? So-and-so gave them $4 million, so therefore maybe you should give us more money. Like even the school that loses out on the player benefits from the number being large. That there is a lot of incentive to report large numbers. And the agents that are pushing all this kind of stuff, as I told Jeff on Friday, the quality of college football information that we get is going down because this new category of stakeholder within the sport, the agents, they're just not truthful people. They would say that their responsibility is to their client. Their responsibility is not to, to us. But the quality of information we're getting in the agent age is clearly going down. Let's see what else. A little bit of driving talking here. I've sort of said my piece on that, at least for now. Don't care a ton about speeding. That's between you and your insurance provider. I forgot I'm still signed out of Facebook. I got to get signed into Facebook. Let me see if I can sign in real quick. I'm not going to be able to do that right now. I don't remember what my, let's see. Let's see if I remember what my Facebook password is. Do I remember my Facebook password? Let us see. Let us see. It's one of those two-factor. I swear. I hate all this stuff. You got to do two-factor authentication. I'll get signed back into Facebook on my laptop at some point in time. I don't really use my laptop. I'm sorry, Facebook, other than when I'm on the show. So let me go to my phone here for a moment. I'll take a few Facebook comments. I apologize for that. Jacob O'Neill says, I just don't want to talk to y'all. And that's not true. That's not the case. I don't use my laptop a ton when I'm not doing the show. B, I don't really use Facebook unless we're on the show. I just wasn't really thinking. Let's see what else. Jerry Poppins says, the thing I like most about basketball is when the season ends, I might watch some. He says, if the 40-minute game didn't take 3 hours. Look, they've got some issues with the clock. The reviews are just painful. I do get that. I still like the tournament, though. Man, it's still a great event. Still a great event. Doug Raymer pointing out that the Diamond Dogs had as many home runs this past weekend as the Gators had runs scored, period. Doug, that's a really impressive number, is it not? Grady Darcy says, how many of the other schools are giving big money to kids who are going to peak in college? UGA is teaching and coaching kids to earn far more over their entire lives on and off the field. Yeah, I think that feels really good. I'll also admit that some of the NIL figures that are not exaggerated are getting high enough now where, you do have to sort of take that. Like we would always say in the early days of NIL that NFL pays more than NIL. Well, some of these guys are making so much in NIL now, you almost wonder how true that really is anymore. Randy Hall asked me about my score for the tournament. Let's see if I can figure this out. Because let's see if I can figure this out. All right, go to the Golden Shoe Bracket Challenge. So I only have 37 points out of 157 possible. So I only have 37 out of 157 possible. That's all that I have. So I'm not sure where that puts me. But only actually it says I'm ranked 18th. Maybe that's not so bad. I think it says I'm ranked 18th, so maybe not as bad. Johnny Prescott says I have a reputation to maintain. I can't go dumpster diving on Facebook. Listen, it's y'all who are going to hurt your reputation by hanging out with me, and more so than me hurting my reputation hanging out with you. Robert Brown says there are a lot of questions about our dogs this year, but let's go Dogs. Yeah, listen, I'm right there with you. No shortage of things to find out, some challenges, some criticisms to be responded to, for sure. But at the same time, a chance for Georgia to really resoundingly, refute all of that, too. I think that's the case. Gary Alt says it's funny how quickly college football changed with the NIL and the transfer portal. He says it's hard to stack talent from one year to the next. Coaches have their work cut out for them. Yeah, I mean, like the one thing that was clearly a major part of Georgia's early success was Kirby Smart's ability to just sort of stack depth. And he was able to do that by saying, you may not play here right away, but you're developing here from the word go. And the NFL draft's not going to care if you played here or not. They're still going to draft you high. And I do believe that was a pretty effective message. But for any program, the ability to really stack the same level of depth just doesn't seem like you have as much of that anymore. And so that means it's a little bit more like a 53-man NFL roster where, you've just got to be able to depend on some guys. And, you're not going to have as many sure things involved. All right, let's see what else is going on over here. Go back over to YouTube for a second here, and we'll do DawgNation.com. Doug Magnus mentioning what Georgia already has the quarterback spot. So I think that Georgia likes its quarterbacks. I don't know that it likes any of them or collectively all of them enough that it wouldn't also be interested in Jared Curtis too. I mean, Georgia has gone pretty far down the road with Curtis, so they're pretty obviously interested. Now, are they going to do whatever it takes to win this battle? I don't know that they feel desperate about this either. As we said earlier, they obviously like Stockton. I think they really like Puglisi too. I would say that Montgomery for me right now is a little bit more of an unknown. He's battled injury and just a little bit more of an unknown situation. But they also like Jared Curtis as well. Now, managing all of that is not easy, but that's kind of what the name of the game sort of is. Mr. Y says, I cannot wait for G-Day. A lot of questions will be answered. We'll be one step closer to football. God knows I miss it. I'm right there with you on that for sure, on all fronts. On all fronts indeed. We may have a little bit of an issue with our DawgNation.com. SEM Dog says, with NIL leading to parity, the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator become even more important. I think that's probably true. So it looks like we're having a little bit of an issue there at DawgNation.com. I'm not sure what happened there on that. Chef Jay Bowen says, I'm up in UT land now. Well, listen, Chef, checking in from enemy territory and still being a part of our show, we really appreciate that, Chef. Thank you very much. A D-Mart on the subject of the edge rusher position. Yeah, boy, if you're looking at the biggest unknown of all for Georgia, that may be it right now. Not a lot of experience. You think about a spring portal window, probably the first place to imagine Georgia's likely to go on that. I think you're probably right about that. Oh, okay. So apparently DawgNation.com is maybe back up again if people want to get back out and get back in. We're also about to kind of wrap up the show here in a minute there too. All right. So good stuff. Anything else before we go? People kind of taking some criticism of the Athens PD. And listen, I don't get into that kind of stuff as much because the honest truth is, as I said before, I drive a ton. And what I'm telling you is, as I feel like, this is not a statement about the Georgia players in particular, but just driving in general, I feel like reckless driving is a huge issue right now, a huge issue. I see it all the time. I'm not talking about going fast. I'm talking about weaving in and out of traffic. So, perhaps putting me at odds with some of you, I am in favor of aggressive policing of reckless driving. I am in favor of that. If I don't live in Athens, I live near Athens. I don't live in Athens. But if that was my community, I would want my community aggressively policed to keep the road safe. So, in all of this discussion, my beef is not going to be with the Athens Police Department. It's not. It's not. Especially in light of the Easley situation from Friday. I mean, if anything, the scandal is, perhaps that should have been, even harsher than it was. So like I said, there's room for a lot of opinions on all this kind of stuff. But the one thing you don't hear me saying very much of is why is the police doing this? I want the roads policed somewhat. Now, I don't personally want to get a speeding ticket, but I do appreciate the roads being policed aggressively because reckless driving puts people in danger. All right. Anything else before we go? Gary Holt checking out. We're getting ready to check out too. Grady Darcy encouraging people to stay out of the left lane except for passing. I would second that. Frederick Meredith also says between Joseph Jonah-Janye, Isaiah Gibson, Quintavious Johnson, Gabe Harris, Georgia's going to do a credible enough job setting the edge for Georgia's front. I love all the talent. I think all those guys have a real chance to be very good football players. I do think the absence of experience is one of those things that Georgia's looking to address. I do. And the player that Georgia brings in, if it does bring someone in, probably on paper not as spectacular potentially as those names you mentioned, but you probably also kind of just need some experience. You probably need some experience. All right, anything else? All right, we're ready to wrap up for now. Y'all have a great day. Hey, find R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust R.S. Andrews for all of that, including as we head towards what so far has been a beautiful spring. Air conditioning, though, they're on, they're working, they're keeping you cool on the inside of your house, but maybe your old unit's not quite doing what it could be doing. So get some new life out of that old unit by getting it tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Our friends at R.S. Andrews will do that for you, and it may only cost you $99 to get it done. So find out more online, rsandrews.com. Y'all have a great day. We're back tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then.